Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in diplomacy when words cut deeper than swords, when confidence speaks louder than power, and when dignity reshapes the narrative of global politics. One such moment was when India's External Affairs Minister, Minister Jaishankar, in his calm yet firm manner, reminded the world that India will not be lectured or belittled. His legendary remark, "Sit down, boy," was not just directed at one individual, but symbolized the arrival of a new India, an India that speaks as an equal, not as a subordinate. For decades, the international stage was tilted in favor of a few powers. Nations like ours were expected to listen, not to speak, to obey, not to challenge. But today, India's voice cannot be silenced, and Jaishankar, with his wit and clarity, made that abundantly clear. That remark left America, and indeed the world, speechless, not because of aggression, but because of the truth it carried. It was the truth of India's rise, the truth of its self-respect, and the truth that in this century, India does not seek validation, it commands recognition. Jaishankar's words embodied confidence, history, and vision. They reminded the world that respect is not demanded, it is earned. And India, with its democracy, economy, and culture, has earned its place at the table. So when he said, "Sit down, boy," wasn't arrogance. It was a statement of dignity. It was the voice of a nation that refuses to be patronized. It was India telling the world, we are not just participants in global affairs, we are leaders shaping them. Symbol of self-respect, the remark highlighted India's refusal to be talked down to by any power, including the U.S. shift in global power dynamics. It signified the rise of India as an equal player on the world stage. Diplomatic confidence showcased Jaishankar's calm, witty, and sharp diplomatic style. Breaking colonial mindset, a strong rejection of the West's long-standing habit of lecturing others. India's global recognition affirmed that India doesn't seek approval, but commands respect. Voice of the new India reflected the assertive, self-assured India of the 21st century. When Dr. Jaishankar firmly uttered the words, "Sit down, boy," it was not just an isolated response to an interruption. It became a living symbol of self-respect for India on the global stage. For decades, developing nations have often been subjected to a condescending tone from the so-called great powers, where their perspectives were brushed aside or treated as secondary. But in that single moment, Jaishankar broke the pattern. His words carried the weight of centuries of India's struggle for dignity, from colonial subjugation to the hard-earned independence that shaped our democracy. It was not arrogance, nor was it disrespect. It was the assertion that India will engage in discussions as an equal and will not tolerate being dismissed or patronized. The remark encapsulated the idea that respect is a two-way street in diplomacy. No nation, however powerful, has the right to belittle another. By commanding that respect in such a decisive manner, Jaishankar was not only defending himself, but also giving voice to the pride of 1.4 billion Indians who expect their leaders to stand tall and firm. That brief but powerful phrase reminded the world that India's foreign policy is guided by self-confidence, not submissiveness, and that dignity is non-negotiable in its international dealings. And the moment Dr. Jaishankar delivered that sharp and unapologetic remark, it carried an impact that went far beyond the walls of the event. It reflected a fundamental shift in the global balance of power. For a long time, the international stage has been dominated by a handful of countries who shaped narratives, dictated rules, and assumed a sense of superiority in global affairs. In such an environment, countries like India were often expected to play a supporting role, to nod along while others decided the script. But with one confident statement, Jaishankar symbolized the reality that this old order is fading and a multipolar world is emerging. India is no longer a silent observer in world politics. It has become an indispensable voice shaping discussions on trade, security, technology, and climate change. The very fact that such a remark could stun representatives of established powers shows that they are beginning to recognize India's rise as inevitable. It was not just about silencing an individual. It was about signaling that the days of unquestioned Western dominance are over. Jaishankar's response represented India's ability to engage with the most powerful nations on equal terms, not with hesitation, but with assertiveness. It reminded the world that the 21st century will not be defined by one or two superpowers, but by the collective influence of emerging giants like India. In that instant, the balance of dialogue tilted. No longer was the United States or any other nation the only one setting the tone. India had made it clear. Its voice matters, its stance matters, and its presence is now central to the new architecture of global politics. One of the most striking elements of Dr. Jaishankar's response was not just the words themselves, but the way in which he delivered them. Calm, measured, and utterly confident. In diplomacy, tone often speaks louder than content. A single phrase, if spoken with hesitation or anger, can lose its weight. But Jaishankar's choice of words, matched with his steady demeanor, demonstrated the quiet strength of a leader who knows his nation's worth and does not feel the need to prove it to anyone. This is the essence of diplomatic confidence, the ability to disarm opponents not through aggression, but through poise and precision. India's external affairs minister has become known globally for his sharp wit, clarity of thought, and ability to counter even the most pointed questions with facts and composure. In this particular moment, his response was not a display of rashness, but of controlled authority. It reminded the world that confidence in international relations is not about raising one's voice. It is about standing firm on one's principles, using the right words at the right time. Such confidence comes from the credibility India has built in recent years as a growing economy, a responsible democracy, and a reliable partner on global issues. Jaishankar's remark, therefore, was not personal bravado. It was an extension of India's national confidence. It reflected the mindset of a country that no longer feels the need to seek validation or approval from others. Instead, India asserts its position with clarity, knowing that its words carry weight on their own merit. This moment exemplified the power of diplomacy when wielded with intelligence, dignity, and unwavering self-assurance. When Dr. Jaishankar chose those firm words, it was more than a rebuttal to a single individual. It was a symbolic strike against a centuries-old colonial mindset that has long lingered in international relations. For far too long, many Western nations have carried an implicit assumption that they possess the authority to lecture, to dictate, and to judge the rest of the world. This attitude, born from colonial history, often manifests in the way developing nations are addressed, as though they are perpetual students needing lessons, while the West alone plays the role of teacher. India, with its deep scars from colonial exploitation, understands the weight of this historical imbalance more than most. That is why Jaishankar's firm retort was not simply a personal defense. It was a clear rejection of this outdated worldview. By telling someone to sit down, he was, in essence, instructing the old order itself to take its place, to recognize that the days of speaking down to others are over. This act of defiance was not reckless, but deliberate and rooted in history. It communicated that India, once subjugated, now stands as a proud and independent voice, unwilling to be patronized or reduced. It reminded the world that colonial arrogance has no place in modern diplomacy, where respect must be mutual and dialogue must be conducted on equal terms. Jaishankar's words became a mirror reflecting the transformation of India's identity, from a nation that once struggled under foreign dominance to one that now pushes back against condescension with confidence and clarity. It was as if he was speaking not just for India, but for all nations that have endured similar histories of subjugation, signaling that the colonial shadow no longer defines how the world engages with emerging powers. Dr. Jaishankar's firm words also carried a deeper message, that India has reached a stage where it no longer seeks validation from others, but instead commands recognition on the strength of its own achievements. For decades, the global order often measured India through the lens of external approval, questioning its economic path, its democratic choices, or its foreign policy independence. But moments like this demonstrate that India has grown beyond that need. Today it stands tall, not because someone else acknowledges it, but because its record speaks for itself. India is now the world's most populous nation, a major economy, a hub for innovation, and a trusted partner in global supply chains. It plays a vital role in international organizations, contributes to peacekeeping, and offers solutions to challenges such as climate change, digital transformation, and sustainable development. All of this has built India's credibility as a power whose presence cannot be ignored. Jaishankar's remark was, therefore, not an isolated show of confidence. It was rooted in the undeniable reality of India's rising stature. What makes this recognition unique is that it has been earned, not demanded. India's influence has come from demonstrating resilience, maintaining democratic values, and balancing relationships with multiple powers while still preserving its sovereignty. When Jaishankar told someone to sit down, it was symbolic of this hard-earned position, a reminder that India no longer accepts being treated as a junior partner in world affairs. Instead, it insists on being heard as an equal contributor to shaping the global future. This moment crystallized the truth that recognition is not given out of courtesy. It follows strength, credibility, and consistency. And India, through decades of persistence, has achieved all three. The world was reminded that engaging with India today means engaging with a nation whose influence is global, whose voice carries weight, and whose recognition is no longer optional, but inevitable. Perhaps the most powerful dimension of Dr. Jaishankar's remark was that it reflected not only his own firmness, but the spirit of a changing nation, the new India. For many years, India's foreign policy carried the burden of cautiousness shaped by historical experiences of colonization, partition, and economic struggle. But in recent decades, India has undergone a profound transformation, politically, economically, and socially. Today, it is no longer content with being on the sidelines of global decision-making. Instead, it asserts its presence with clarity and confidence. The new India is not defensive, it is proactive. It does not wait for permission to speak. It demands space in every forum, from the G20 to the United Nations. It is proud of its heritage, yet bold in embracing modernity and technology. When Jaishankar told someone to sit down, it resonated with millions of Indians who see themselves as citizens of a nation that will no longer be talked down to, but will instead set the tone of conversations. This was not a personal victory. It was a collective statement of national character. The remark captured the essence of a generational shift from an India that once struggled for recognition to an India that shapes narratives. It was the voice of a nation that has the confidence to balance relationships with both East and West, to pursue independent policies without bending to pressure, and to project strength without losing humility. The new India is one that does not shy away from confrontation when necessary, yet always stands grounded in principle and respect. By embodying this voice, Jaishankar reminded the world that India is entering a new era, one defined not by hesitation, but by conviction, not by dependency, but by leadership. This voice of the new India is not temporary or situational. It is the voice that will continue to echo across global platforms, shaping the way the world perceives India in the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, that simple but powerful phrase, "Sit down, boy," was not just a rebuttal in the heat of the moment. It was a turning point, a declaration, a reminder that India's dignity cannot be compromised. It left not only America, but the entire world speechless, because it spoke a truth that can no longer be ignored. India has arrived, and it will be heard. This was more than a diplomatic exchange. It was the voice of a nation that carries the strength of its past, the confidence of its present, and the vision of its future. It was a statement that respect is no longer a courtesy extended to India, It is a recognition that India has earned through its resilience, its values, and its rise on the global stage. So let the world take note. This is the new India. An India that speaks as an equal. An India that cannot be silenced. An India whose voice, once spoken, echoes across the globe with authority and pride.